building code changed from year to year to year, so it very well could have been built to the code that was at that time.
Sure.
And so that's the one thing that you always have to kind of calculate into something that old.
Yes, sir. Steve.
I want to give a thanks to our acting city attorney for her comments. Those were very apropos to keep us out of a libel or slander suit. Thank you.
Anything else, Zulema?
Mayor, I would only offer that, with the compromised condition of the roof and, the recommendations of our experts in this area, we are asking for the project to move forward quite quickly. And so that kind of segues into the financial portion of the discussion, if you're done with me.
Almost done with you. I would ask, we have been through several of your presentations when it comes to subsidies. And I know with the rec center, it's always been on my radar, as you know, from the day I walked in the doors. So what would a project like this do to the ability to still meet your subsidy goals? In other words, how long would the pool be down? When would this take place if it's approved?
Mayor, great question. So the design team is working on finalizing the design. We hope to bid the project, I might tell you the wrong date, in April, is that right?
Right.
In April of this year. And so the way the project is going to bid is the base bid will be for us to span construction over 2 summers so that people can utilize our outdoor pools as an alternative while the aquatic center is down. However, we suspect that that may cause an increase in the price, perhaps, for mobilizing a contractor twice to come do work. And so as an alternate bid, we are asking for a full length of construction schedule, and then we will do a cost benefit analysis based on calculations of possible opportunity loss at the aquatic center in terms of revenue, and what the construction cost differential may be. In addition, we are exploring alternatives in terms of where we could still offer swim lessons and things like that while the aquatic center is closed. There are other indoor aquatic facilities in the community that we may have an opportunity to partner with so that we can still offer swim instruction during that time. So we're trying to examine all options so that when the bid comes back, we can make an educated decision about how we should proceed.
Fair enough.
And, in terms of the capital expense, we don't generally calculate capital expenses within our subsidy for operations. So
that brings us to the financial aspect of it, Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Jill and Zulema have been working on a plan here, and certainly Jill and I have been discussing this as well. And I think we've got an alternative that would help us move forward in a manner that would be less costly than waiting until we actually can do the project and incur those costs. So with that, if I could defer to Jill to walk us through that, Mr. Mayor, that'd be great.
Ms. Johnson, if you please.
Thank you, Mayor, councilors. Could you guys pull up my spreadsheet that's in the folder? As has already been discussed, this is a project that was actually budgeted out of our 1 cent 17 money. So the problem with that is, of course, is we get that money over time. So we have a cash flow issue. We don't necessarily have a budgetary issue because we expect to get the money. It's just not in time to do the project. So what we tried to do is we tried to look at the cost. I'm not going to go to this one. I'm actually going to start with, sorry, that's okay. It's disappearing, the disappearing spreadsheet. I'm going to start with investment interest. So one of the options that we looked at was, what if we liquidated our investments and used that to fund this project? We could do that, and then over time, we could pay that money back into our investments. Except that would cost us some money. So if we were to take out the $1.8 million, we would lose 84,000. I'm not going to touch it anymore. It's not a touchscreen, is
I
it?
cannot
Can you see it?
You good, you got it.
Okay, so we would lose $84,000 in interest the first year. And this is based on our current quarterly performance report that we received from FIB. Can you go up a little bit?
Yes.
Thank you. This is our yield to maturity. So that is what we're actually getting on our investments at this point in time. So if we went to year 2, we would repay some of that money. So, but we would still have an outstanding balance. So we would lose another $63,000 in that year. So overall, the moral to the story is if we scroll down, over the term that it would take us to repay this money, we would lose $126,000 of interest. Okay, so that was one option though. So then if we go to the capital construction loan tab, so then we looked at, well, what if we borrow the money? What would that look like? So in this, go a little bit, there we go. We looked at our principal. There is an origination fee. So that's in here at the 0.5%. And then we would look at an interest rate. On this loan, which is done through SLIB, the longer the term, the higher the interest rate. So we didn't need this for a huge amount of time because we're going to repay it with our 1 cent money as we receive it over the next 5 years. So we did a 5-year term, and it's a 1% interest rate. And this would be our payment, principal, interest, balance is 0. So if we scroll all the way down to the bottom, we would see that the interest we would pay would be $56,000. So this is a better option than cashing in our investments and losing that money. So this is the option we would like to recommend if you all would be interested in funding this project now and then repaying it over time. So the two things that would not be repaid with our 1 cent money is going to be the $56,000. Then if you go to the top, it's going to be the origination fee. It's $9,000. So in the design that Zulema has already budgeted and they've already been working on for this project, they're going to have a little bit of extra money left over. So if we go to the cost of the project, this is the design piece. And I know it's a lot of weird numbers, but we have a project that was out there and we decided to roll that project into the roof design project. So that's what this one is. This is our budget. That's the money that came in here. This is what we've spent so far, is these two numbers, to give us a remaining amount of $106,000, which will cover the interest and the origination fee. So we believe that this is the best option, but we are certainly open to your suggestions. We can also, on the capital construction loan, if you click on that tab one more time for me.
I'm assuming that would be your recommendation.
Yes, sir.
If you don't like the 5 years, we can pull it out longer. So if instead of doing 5 years, if you put 6 years in there.
The money would be recovered in 5 years, so why would you do that?
Just to make your payment lower if you wanted to do that. I wouldn't do that, but it's an option that we could look at.
Payment size doesn't matter because that money's being recovered on an annual basis.
I would agree. And you're just making your interest higher.
Right.
So if you scroll back up to the top, you'll see if you did 6 years, your interest rate would go up, which would make your cost of borrowing higher.
Where does that origination fee and the interest go to the state?
Yes.
The
it goes to
loan
state.
and investment
Program.
Correct. Anybody, Cameron?
So the primary motivator for this to prevent waiting on the project so that we don't incur additional increasing construction fees, or is it because we can't wait on the project due to the condition of the roof?
That is a question I don't know if I know the answer to. I'm going to defer that back to Zulema.
Mayor, Counselor, so I would say both.
Okay.
I would say the condition of the roof warrants a more immediate response. And so certainly that's a consideration, but we all know that construction costs are rising each year, and the longer we wait to complete the construction, the more expensive inevitably it will be. So it's kind of
Well,
twofold.
if there's one thing we've learned, even with the one-way, two-way, when you wait, you pay. So, Carter?
Mr. Mayor, I would tell you, from our experience with that idiom you just shared, we will exceed our out-of-pocket costs by quite a bit in terms of the cost of this project alone. my humble opinion.
So we are looking for direction. So if everybody at the table is okay with going through SLIB, give a thumbs up. Okay, Kyle?
Just, I think history is interesting, and so the context of this conversation to me that we're considering 1.8 to replace the roof, I was looking and it cost us cost 5.2 million to build the entire thing from the ground up. So something I think is interesting.
Welcome to 2023, right?
Apparently.
Okay, well, you've got your approval on your direction, sir.
Thank you.
So
Thank
Jill,
you.
thank you. Zalima, thank you.
I have,
Steve?
do you see any issue with getting the loan from SLIB?
Mr. Mayor, Counselor, I don't. I think there's a slim possibility that for whatever reason we wouldn't be awarded, but I think we fit exactly with the rules and the intent of this program.
Follow up, if I may.
Yes, of course.
Is this the same funding mechanism that was thrown out as a possibility for the second sheet of ice at the ice arena?
No. Go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, Counselor, we could certainly look at this as a funding option for the city's share of that fundraising, if you will. And we did discuss some of the terms that this type of program would imply. Our concern with going that route would be that the repayment of that would be based on the proceeds from the ice arena operation from now until whatever period of time we would prescribe in that application. And our summation was that those repayments on an annual basis would essentially match the subsidy that we already pay, even though it wouldn't last forever, obviously. It would only last for the term of the note, whatever that would end up being, if I remember correctly.
The reason I ask is because I didn't know if using this funding mechanism for the roof replacement will have any impact if we consider the same funding mechanism for the second sheet of ice. You know, does SLIB look at your application and say, well, you already have one grant that you're repaying, so that, you know, you lose points over here in this application because you're overextending or anything? Like, is that a possibility?
Mr. Mayor, Councilor, I certainly think that could be a possibility, but I don't think as I, sort of think of this from a gut level instinct that would necessarily take us out of the line.
Thank you.
Okay. Let's move on, shall we? Golf Enterprise?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have the opportunity to continue our installments regarding subsidies to turn to the golf enterprise tonight. The golf enterprise is rather unique, however, in comparison to the tone of our other recreational enterprise discussions, in that we aren't necessarily talking about a subsidy tonight, which ought to bring all of us a huge sigh of relief for this special evening, Valentine's, right? So the opportunity we have to chat about tonight is, what would we like to consider in the form of implementation strategies and so on to potentially increase the margin that we receive through this fund to where it could ostensibly cover capital interests in this operation. And so, it's nice to be able to have this to talk about as it relates to increasing margins versus decreasing subsidies. And yes, I got right to the punchline of what we're talking about this evening, but there's a lot of interesting detail that I think you ought to be aware of as it relates to the distances that we've come, even in this fund, over the last 5 or 6 years. And I'm really appreciative of some of the partnerships and so on that we've engaged, the changes that some of your predecessors have supported to get us where we're at today, as well as the really good work that staff is performing over there. So with that, if I could turn the time over to Zalima and her team, we'll go from there.
Mayor, councilors.
Thank you.
So as the city manager indicated, well, and maybe not quite so, this is actually my last golf or rec enterprise discussion with you. So
For today,
thank
you mean?
We made it. Yes, for today, for this round, and of course the completion of the council goals that were established in 21 to 23. So we do have the opportunity to talk about the golf course and their enterprise, which, as Carter mentioned, is our only profitable enterprise at this time. So we'll start with the season recap. This should look very familiar to you. Really at the golf course, the primary events are our tournaments and our league play, and then of course when our season starts and when it ends. So we have a number of tournaments through July. In August, we have a Special Olympics golf tournament. In August, there's a men's year-end golf tournament for their league. We have couples tournaments. We have a city employee golf tournament, which city employees really enjoy. There's a ladies interclub tournament. This all goes through the heart of the summer season. In October of 21, we had a pass holder appreciation tournament. That's a tournament that has been going on for a couple of years now to show appreciation to our season pass holders at the course, and they certainly enjoy that event. And then from about November 1st to April 1st, the course is closed for the season. That is when our fantastic maintenance team really focuses their energy on equipment maintenance and activities around the course that can be completed through those off months. In April and May of 2022, our men's and ladies leagues kicked off. And then we had more tournaments and clinics and junior camps to round out the fiscal year. So active season, just like at all of our other facilities throughout our open time. So for the fiscal year 22, and so golf is a summer activity, obviously, and so it gets kind of awkward because we span fiscal years. So we have fiscal year through June 30th of 21, and then June 30th of 21 through July or June 30th of 22, and so we split summers awkwardly to make up the fiscal year, but on average, we're open 200 days from dawn till dusk. In last season, we averaged about 150 rounds a day. Our biggest day was 320 rounds, which is quite busy. And approximately 30,000 rounds for the entire season were played at the municipal golf course. So we had just under 450 season passes sold, and 11,000 rounds were played from those season passes. Certainly our adult season passes for that 18 and over group are our highest sales in the season pass category, 386 last season, 44 half season passes. Those are passes that start July 1st and go through the end of the season. Then we have our youth passes for kids 13 to 17, and we had 14 of those sold, and then 5 child passes for children 12 and under. Over 18,000 daily rounds, so those were point of sale purchases for our daily green fees for people who don't have passes, totaling just under $375,000 in revenue. For those of you who don't know, we do offer twilight rounds, so those are after 6 p.m. at a very discounted rate. Right now they're only $15 to play twilight, and you pretty much can go till dark. You do not get a cart, right? Generally, I do not get a cart during twilight. But again, you get the benefit of a discounted round and some of the best sunsets views in the city from the golf course. We do partner with the school district quite a lot, and so 308 school rounds were played, 42 practices between the 2 high school teams and middle school teams. We hosted 2 high school and 1 middle school tournament. As far as our rentals, we rent, of course, our golf cart fleet, but we also rent push carts for those who choose to rent them, and we rent clubs for players who maybe don't have their own set of clubs. And so all of our rentals totaled about $265,000 in revenue last year. And then our driving range, we sold about almost 6,700 buckets of balls for the driving range, to almost $55,000 worth of revenue. And then in our pro shop, we do sell our merchandise, and that's polo shirts, gloves, hats, a lot of the traditional golf wear, $37,000 worth of revenue generated in the shop. And to do all of this through our seasons, we have a total of 4 to 30 employees, 4 of those employees being full-time, 2 of them actually here now, and so I will introduce them to help me answer any questions. So we have Reese Carson. He is our head golf professional, manages the operation of the clubhouse. And then we have Jason Osland. He is our golf course superintendent, who is responsible for the maintenance of the course grounds. And then, of course, Randy Norvell is our parks division manager, and the golf course falls under the parks division. So they will be here to help me answer any questions that you might have about the operation. So, of course, this is a recap of your council goals that I'm finally able to complete once, of course, the business plans are done, which those will hopefully be presented to you all in March after the feedback that you've given us for all of the presentations that I've given. But to report on the homework that was given as part of that council goal. So these are the revenue sources that we utilize in golf. We have season passes, we have user fees, which are our greens fees, rentals and leases, that is our golf cart rentals mostly. There are a few other minor rentals involved in that. We also have a separate line items for rentals and leases that is the 19th hole revenue that we get from the concessioner for food and beverage. So of course, the 19th hole is a full-service restaurant and bar that is on the premises of the golf course. And we'll talk a little bit more about that is one area where we have really exceeded expectations. That operation has grown quite substantially and yielded the city quite an increase in revenue over past years. We also have our merchandise sale, other fees and charges, and then miscellaneous revenue is essentially just advertising that we sell on our scorecards. So, of course, the homework for the other groups was to compile a list of adverse reactions. Should funding be cut, since this fund does not have a transfer in or a general fund subsidy infusion, we really just kind of thought about the operation as a whole, and if we needed to cut funding for whatever reason, we would certainly have to look at reducing course maintenance and specialized programming at the golf course. We might entertain closing the golf course certain days of the week to reduce labor and maintenance costs. And of course, we would look at rate increases. And so I will be proposing the rate or sharing the rate model with you so you guys can see the numbers. But before that, we want to talk about proposed strategies to reduce expenses and increase revenue. So even though the cost recovery goal was established at 110% for this enterprise, and we do have profitable years, the team is always working hard and looking at opportunities to reduce our costs and increase the revenue. Everything in excess of 100% stays in that fund and can be used for capital investments at the course, which traditionally is equipment. We need a lot of lawn mowers and carts to do the work that we do at the golf course. And so that's how those funds are generally spent, on golf equipment. But certainly the more revenue we get into the fund, the more capital dollars we may have available to invest in the operation of the facility. In terms of increasing revenue, we have already or in the process or are just letting you know of some future strategies to increase our revenue. So restructured partnerships is the first one. So we have actually been in talks with the Natrona County School District and our memorandum of understanding for facility use. The golf course is historically a facility of the cities that they have used at no charge other than the driving range. And unfortunately, that creates a lot of opportunity loss for us at the course, because when the students are on the course, we can't have paying golfers on the course. And so we did negotiate with the school district. They will start to pay, assuming that the MOU is approved by all parties, a $1,500 fee per season for their players to be on course. So although it's small, it does help offset some of the loss that we see from not being able to have other golfers on the course. And then men's league and really all league play. Reese has done a really great job of working with our league groups to help manage and develop those programs so that they continue to grow and be successful. If our leagues are successful, our course is successful. So he's invested some time and energy there in helping them. And that is providing some benefits. And in fact, this season we'll get even more involved in bolstering some of that activity. Certainly, we would like to reduce operational costs in any way that we can. And so city water purchasing, I'm actually going to talk about down here with capital, but really the best thing that we can do at the golf course is monitor and adjust our personnel expense, our non-full-time staff personnel expense during the season, and material expenses. This is one operation where if we have a terrible weather day, we don't call our seasonal staff in, and so then we can see savings if we can't generate revenue on the course by having players out there. So they're very good about, you know, not calling staff in or sending staff home if the weather doesn't allow for players on the course. In other conversations under this operational cost conversation, we have talked about credit card fees. And so I just wanted to offer an update. So unfortunately, thanks to some homework done by City Finance and our customer service team, we have found that our golf and ski enterprises do not qualify for transferring those credit card fees to our customers. So the way our credit card processing works, we all fall into different categories, and we don't fall into a broad government category. We're itemized as golf course, Hogadon, or ski operations, different things. So there are some of the rec enterprises that we will not be able to benefit from passing those fees along directly. We have options to increase our rates to cover the credit card expense that we are paying and then offer discounts to those who pay cash. And we're exploring some of those options as alternatives since we can't just automatically transfer those fees to the customer. We continue to try to add value to our season passes. You know, much like the discussion we had about Hogadon, our season pass holders are kind of the base of our revenue, and they take a lot of risk because if we have a terrible weather season, they're paying the same amount for their pass as if we had a great weather season and they could golf every day. So we really appreciate that customer base and we want to show them that. So we have an end of the year pass holder appreciation tournament. We provide a small gift for the purchase of passes. In the past, that has been divot repair tools and water bottles. And so just small tokens to show our gratitude to those customers. And then we also offer twilight discounts for junior players that play with pass holders. So this is essentially if you are an adult and you have a pass, you can bring a minor to the course under the age of 12. Under the age of 12 after 3 o'clock p.m. and they will play for free. So this is a way that families can play together as well as introducing young people to the sport of golf and making it affordable for those who want to play. Then implementing improvements to drive business. So Club Caddy is a new software that allows us online tee times as well as a lot of really robust reporting that we didn't have access to before. So we're really excited for the transition to Club Caddy. Reese has done a really great job over this off season of diving in and learning the ins and outs of that software so that we can maximize it to its full potential. And so we're already seeing some benefit and a lot of users going online to schedule their own tee times, which of course saves in the pro shop with customer service. Range Servant is our new range ball dispenser. So that was a project that was approved by you all as a capital expenditure in FY23. So we're in the process of getting that project finalized. We're building a shed for the range ball dispenser to go into, and then of course purchasing the equipment. So this will be located on the driving range, and it will allow customers to go up, use a credit card to pay, and get range balls on their own without having to go into the pro shop. The real benefit to that is it extends the hours that people can be on the driving range because the pro shop is only open from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. And of course, if you can be on the golf course at dawn during the middle of the summer, that's often 6. And oftentimes it doesn't get dark until 7 or 8 or even later. So, so that will extend the amount of time that we can offer the driving range to customers. Certainly marketing and social media presence matters in golf, and so we will direct some marketing dollars to some very strategic placements of digital ads and things, primarily to drive our pass sales, but also to just get people to come out to the course. Youth on Course is a national junior program that Reese is exploring. It's a potential exciting opportunity for us. Essentially, Youth on Course is a third-party agency that we can offer rounds through. And so, for instance, if we offer, if the standard price is a $10 round, people who are signed up for Youth on Course can get a $5 round, and Youth on Course, the company, will send us the difference in the payment once a month in reimbursements. So it's something that we are exploring for the future. Reese has also done a great job of retooling our junior golf program. So under Gary Marsh, that program really diminished and was non-existent for the last few years. The first year we had our golf pro, Todd, before Reese. He did not have an assistant, and so we did not have a junior golf program. Since Reese was hired as the assistant, and since then has been promoted to be our head golf professional, he is really starting to grow that junior program again in terms of lessons and clinics that he offers to the youth in the community. So that is really great. And then the last one is new GPS cart fleet with advertising capabilities. So you've probably heard we got a new golf fleet. It's been quite the rage over the last couple of weeks. Exciting. People have been asking what we're doing with the fleet. It was a leased fleet, so it went back to the leasing company. Our new loaner fleet is set to arrive certainly before the start of our season, because the brand new fleet still needs to be manufactured, and it's about 480 days out. So, so we will not have a brand new golf cart fleet this year, and I just want to make sure that everybody knows that. However, the loaner fleet, we do anticipate will be better than the fleet that we just retired that was much older. So, but the exciting thing about the new golf fleet is that it does come with the capability to add GPS. And the GPS capability also allows us to add advertising. So although that there is a cost involved in the GPS component, we could recover that cost and probably make additional revenue. We're estimating to the tune of about $3,000 to put advertising on the monitors that function as GPS as well. So that's an exciting new amenity that we should be able to offer. And then for our long-term plan for reducing expenses and increasing revenue, I'll go back to the reducing city water. So currently we do have a reservoir that we irrigate out of. When that reservoir dries up at the end of the season, we do have to pay for water to irrigate the golf course. And so as a way to eliminate or very minimally reduce the amount of city water that we have to purchase, we are going to be looking at a project to dredge the pond. Right now there's a lot of sediment in the pond, which reduces the holding capacity, which reduces the amount of water we have to irrigate with. And so that will be a capital project, hopefully in the very near future, that will give us better capacity and save us on irrigation dollars. Additionally, we want to upgrade irrigation throughout the course, primarily on the links course, to make it more efficient, reduce the maintenance costs associated with that aging system, which will improve the turf health there. And then, of course, ultimately, we would like to update the clubhouse, build a new clubhouse that people can enjoy that will allow for more merchandise and possibly some winter programming.
We have some questions for you,
Okay.
Lisa.
For the water, is it a possibility to put in a well or two and then just to help get the water, and then you wouldn't have to be paying for water?
Mayor, Counselor, I think Randy has examined well opportunities throughout our entire park system. So I'm going to defer to him.
Mayor, councilors. Drilling wells up there would be no use. the quality of water that we could get at a shallower rate would be too high in sodium and salt, and it would not be suitable for turf. We currently get our water supply off the West Elkhorn, which on a good year, it could carry us through without having to purchase water, but it all depends on how meltdown comes or how much moisture we get through the summer. That we have to use it. We have had to utilize it the last 2 years at a cost of about $10,000 roughly per year. Previously, I think probably 4 or 5 years, if I'm not mistaken, Jason, there was no cost of city water. So a lot depends on runoff and our moisture.
By all means.
I appreciate Randy bringing that up. It's an interesting dynamic that we have up there in that if we had the storage capacity and the drainage was flowing like we hope it would every year and so on, we would be able to store the water that we need in order to irrigate our greens and so on, our fairways and whatnot, even in down years, I think. So we've looked at what it would take to fix the pond in such a way that it could hold capacity sufficient to get us through some of the leaner years, if you will. And I think we heard that number was in excess of $700,000, if I remember correctly. Is that right? To dredge appropriately and get the basin in such a way that we could pull off of that drainage and be good for the irrigation season that the golf course requires.
Well, forgive me, but with those stats, $700,000 to dredge it. And in the last couple of years, it's only cost us $10,000 a year to buy water. Why would we spend that kind of money to dredge the pond? Why would we? I mean, we could go 70 years buying water at that rate. Ma'am.
So that's a great point, and certainly we have evaluated that $700,000 figure because it seems a little astronomical. I think those quotes, first of all, were a little aged. Second of all, staff has identified that if they didn't have to dredge the material and haul it off, we could save substantially on the cost. And so, staff is proposing that we may be able to utilize the material that they pull out, mound it, create other features around the golf course so that they wouldn't have to haul the material and add to the cost. So we're trying to identify ways to reduce the cost of that dredging. Advances in equipment and different things may garner some better cost proposals as well. So I'm going to say that we likely would not propose a project to the tune of $700,000, but something more reasonable that has a better return on investment.
I was going to say, if you even cut that in half, that's still going to give you 35 years worth of buying water at the rate we're buying it. And on a year like this, you're not going to have to buy any, my assumption. So, I don't know, that'll be a tough sell if I'm sitting here, just so you know. I did have another question for you, if I may. When you were talking about the school district paying the $1,500 to help cover the cost of students on the course when the public can't be on there, we have 3 courses up there, so why couldn't the public be on 1 or 2 of the courses while the students are on the other? Why does the entire thing have to be shut down when they're on a course? Or are they on all 3 of them at one time?
Mayor, I will let Reese address that question. I think I may have described that in a way that was confusing, so I'll let him take over.
Mayor, councilors, so right now, they come out in the afternoons and play their golf rounds, is how it currently works. All the other courses are looking into charging. I know the private ones charge currently a base for them to use the facilities. I do know we have 27 holes, but we do have 18-hole golfers and 9-hole golfers. So when you schedule a tee time online, you'll have 9 holes that's just for the 9-holers, and then the 18, when they turn, we don't get a jam up on the course. And then it keeps the course moving. Right now, the high schools are pretty good about letting customers go through and not holding them up. but it is kids learning golf, so pace of play is a little slow whenever they're out there on the property.
And they're walking also.
They are walking, yes, sir.
Thank you. Any other questions, anybody? Go ahead, Steve.
The GPS you're gonna be getting in the new carts, will they be able to geofence? I think that's what it's called, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Will they be able to geofence with them? So we can keep the idiots off the greens and out of the water hazards. Okay.
Absolutely, Mayor, Counselor. That's one of the benefits to having GPS on the carts is that we can geofence and stop the carts from going onto parts of the course that we don't want them on. So they
Excellent.
won't go on the greens. They hopefully don't get into the water hazards. If there are areas of the course that require special maintenance that we want to keep people off of, we're able to do that quite readily. So that is a benefit to reduce maintenance costs, hopefully, as well.
Excellent.
Kyle?
Thank you, Bruce. Zulima, thanks for all the information. Could you please speak, you or one of the other gentlemen, about carts? What is the reasoning for the policy of carts? Is it 5 p.m. that the last time you can rent a cart is 5 p.m.? And if so, I'm curious to know the rationale.
So, Mayor, councilors, the rationale behind that is there's currently no lighting. So it is kind of a safety issue to have staff out there when cards come back because it'd be late, dark, and the lighting is just not very good out there currently. The other reason is we did double check with other courses as well. Everyone has a set time frame to get those cards back in. We use that as a way to make sure that we can get people safely home. We also do, it should only take about 2 hours to play. So that gives you 2 hours before dusk. And that time does change. It's not strictly 5 o'clock. So as it's late, like sometimes it stays light till 9. It's usually about 15 to 30 minutes before dark that we'll require them back in. And that's just for safety concerns, especially when you're driving a cart back in dark. If you're on the far side of the property and you stay out there till dark without a set time to come in, you got to worry about rocks. You got to worry about driving over the greens, the tee boxes, all the other things that can come into play.
Anybody else? Zulema, do you have more?
Well, I did want to share the
Sure.
rate model with you.
Of course.
It's going to drive that for me, as usual. While I'm waiting for him to pull up, I really just want to give a solid shout out to the team at the golf course. The maintenance staff does an exceptional job. I get compliments all summer long about the condition of the course. And certainly that drives business. People talk, golfers talk, and if the condition of the course is excellent, people will go there to play. And so I definitely want to give Jason and his team the credit that they deserve for helping to drive revenue, because we usually think of, just the pro shop operation and the items that our golf professional is engaging in, but certainly maintenance comes into play quite significantly when it comes to a golf course. So also want to talk about the concessionaire at the golf course, which of course is Johnson Restaurant Group, and they have now been there 3 years, 2 years, 3 years. Okay, 3 years. And so this current optimized model shows where we're at with our budget. So these are all of our budgeted figures for fiscal year 23, utilizing sales numbers from fiscal year 22, shows our objectives to meet our budget. You can go ahead and zoom out. And you'll see, as budgeted, we were pretty conservative. A little bit down. Yep. And we budgeted right at 100% cost recovery. So we wanted to make sure that we broke even. Of course, our cost recovery goal is 110%, and it benefits the fund to exceed that 100% because those dollars are then available for capital for the operation. But so that is as budgeted. This right side shows what we actually believe we will generate for fiscal year 23. A lot of it is weather dependent. So as you see the weather today is not making me feel warm and fuzzy about a warm spring, but we hope that that's what happens, and we have weather that's conducive to a good early golf season. But we do believe that under this optimized model, so I get down this paddle. Oh, down. More. I want to see this whole block right here. Perfect. Okay. So, so I just want to explain some things about this particular model. So I think I have shared with you guys in the past, we develop our budgets in February. Of course, golf season hasn't even started in February, and so we try to use some fairly conservative projections in our budgeting, which is why we were just at 100%. When we finished out fiscal year 22, we actually finished quite strong, and so these percentage increases here represent just the numbers that we were able to achieve in fiscal year 22. Again, weather permitting, we have no reason to believe that those numbers will go down. In fact, they should go up, but even if they just remain consistent, that coupled with a very minor increase in our pass sales, hopefully due to some strategic and targeted marketing, we should be able to get to our 110% cost recovery. Also wanted to point out this 95% increase over what was budgeted for fiscal year 23 for our 19 hole revenue. We are currently on track to hit $35,000. We budgeted at $18,000 for the fiscal year. Our biggest year before that was $9,000. So that is a significant improvement in the revenue that we're earning from the concessionaire through the restaurant and bar. So again, on track for FY23 to hit 35,000 this year in revenue, and we really expect, because word of mouth in terms of the customer service, the food quality, the location, and the improvements we've made to the interior of the restaurant have been pretty significant, and we're starting to see people frequent the establishment even if they are not golfers. So we really expect this to continue to grow.
How does that number fluctuate? Are you getting a percentage of what they do? It's not just a lease fee that they pay for the space?
Mayor, thank you for that question. Yes, so they pay a flat fee for the lease, and then they pay us 5%.
Gotcha.
They don't pay a flat fee. It's just strictly 5%. Sorry, I'm confusing them with some of our other leases.
It started off at 3%. It was on a progressive increase, so it was 4% their second year and at 5% their third year, and we'll remain at 5%.
Gotcha. So that's how that's increasing. That was my question. Thank you. Kyle, do you have a question before we go on?
I did. Thank you, Bruce. And thank you, Zulima. Could you walk us through that one more time, please, since Johnson Restaurant Group has taken over, what the trend has been?
So the first year they took it over, we did not earn very much at all, less than $2,000 if I remember correctly.
Less than what?
Less than $2,000 or $3,000.
No, we did it's probably around 14,000.
Last year, but the first year.
Okay, the very first year was probably right around 12,000 to 15,000.
Okay. So 12,000 first year, about 14 to 15 last year. This year we're looking at 35.
Wow. Sure.
Mr. Mayor, I can tell you, when I started with the organization, we were looking at $0 in payments from the concessionaire. And that, of course, was before Mr. Johnson agreed to partner with us, and before and after we went out for RFPs that netted 0 participants. It was $0. So this is light years ahead of where I thought we would be at this point in our relationship with Johnson.
Well, we were also subsidizing the entire course back then, and now we're not having to do that. So.
Right.
Zulima?
Okay, so this is our optimized model. Okay, if you'll scroll down, I think this time up. So this puts us right at 100% or 110% cost recovery, which of course is our goal. That means the surplus to the fund would be about $95,000 that would go into the reserve and be available for the operation. Just for fun, since we don't have, I wasn't going to show you what the rates need to be to get to 0 subsidy because we're already beyond that. So in this instance, I'm going to show you what the rates might need to be to get to 125% cost recovery. So The first couple of things that I want to note, so of course, would be our additional revenue generating opportunities. So we have the school district fees here at $1,500. The range ball dispenser, again, because we feel like people will be able to utilize the driving range more hours during the day. We expect that to net us about $7,500 in additional revenue for the driving range. Part advertising, we're estimating at a pretty conservative $3,000. And then if we were able to get even a minimal partnership for corporate sponsorship at $1,000 a year, that would generate about $13,000 in additional revenue that we're not currently making. And then I really kept these the same just so that you could see these are current numbers that we're seeing, not accounting for a loss with cost changes, primarily because our rates are pretty comparable right now, and also because it's been if we propose rate changes for fiscal year 24, which we likely will, not for this upcoming summer season, but for next season. And we'll be preparing that proposal for you all later this fall. But once that time comes, it will have been 3 years since we had an increase in rates at the course. And so we feel like it is time to keep up with inflation and reflect the expenses increasing for the operation, particularly in terms of fuel costs for our operation have skyrocketed. And so we really need to reflect that in our rates. So if you look at increasing the pass rates by these numbers are whole numbers because that's more logical with season passes, but they reflect approximately a 5% increase to the pass rates. And then increase a slight amount for our daily greens fees. And then, a very slight amount for youth and twilight fees, $10 extra to play in a golf tournament, which a portion of that goes to cart rentals, portion of it goes to green fees, portion of it goes to food and beverage. And then the golf cart rental for tournaments, golf cart rentals for regular play. Of course, this will be in a brand new golf fleet with GPS capabilities, so we feel like that's justified. Push cart rentals, all pretty nominal increases. And then, our classes and clinics would go up just slightly. Again, staying on track with what we expect to hit this year for our concessionaire, and hopefully some increases in our merchandise sales. And we think we could hit 125%.
And with that said, I would probably fight you on trying to increase any of the rates. We're operating at 110% and possibly up to 125%. Why on earth would we want to raise rates? Why wouldn't we want to create a value for the people in the city? And if you want more revenue, get more people to come and golf.
Thanks, Bruce. That's a great segue into my question, which was, I don't get to go golfing very often. I'm curious how our rates stack up against the private clubs in Three Crowns. I don't know if we have that information available, but I'm curious how the Muni stacks up.
Mayor, Councilor, I can speak anecdotally and tell you that we are very competitive in our rates around town. We will do a much deeper dive in the future if we do in fact come forward and request rate increases. So we will do a cost comparison. I'm not sure if you recall what we did for the cemetery and for Hogadon. So we will do a very similar cost comparison so you can see locally and regionally what horses are charging and make sure that you feel comfortable with where we propose we fall.
Right, because it's certainly not apples to apples either. The Muni doesn't stack up with Three Crowns, and it doesn't stack up with Paradise Valley, and it doesn't stack up with Country Club. So you can say what you want, it's not the same. So if our rates are even close to theirs, we're out of line. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think we have to consider the business proposal that you're looking at far more holistically than simply meeting operational expenses. The reality is, anytime we need a capital improvement out of the golf course, the fund does not carry the day. So what happens then is the general fund picks up virtually all of the capital improvements, almost all of the equipment replacements. And that means, particularly, I'd like you to be thinking about this when you're thinking about all the police cars we got to buy, all of the other streets we need to repair, and so on. If we don't consider the fact that the golf course needs to be self-sufficient beyond simply meeting operational expenses, we are still siphoning off of the general fund, albeit from a capital perspective, not necessarily an operational perspective. And so my hope is we can think about the business model at the golf course as certainly a model for the rest of the recreational enterprises, but in a more complete fashion, so the general fund doesn't have to give money to any of the enterprises in the recreational world, even from a capital perspective, because we've got some long-term needs out there too. You know, we've got the irrigation system at the links that is in desperate need of repair and will be a big bill. The clubhouse itself has outused its useful life, and even though we've dressed it up, we've fixed a lot of the ailments that it has, we will not be able to get away without replacing that facility eventually. If we don't have a more robust business concept there, it'll always be the general fund that we have to turn to.
Mayor, I would like to add to what Carter's saying, just with the fact that in light of the fact that then this fund has to compete with police and fire and other rec and parks divisions for capital funding, that means oftentimes they don't get the equipment that they need. And so then we're using outdated equipment, and the course conditions suffer because of that. So having a fund that can satisfy at least our smaller dollar capital needs in terms of our mowing equipment, our rollers, improvements they want to make to the pro shop and things like that, would be extremely beneficial to the operation, because, as I have learned over the last year and a half, a lot of times the rec divisions are a lower priority than our public safety and critical infrastructure. And so we're oftentimes the last to be funded for equipment needs.
And you must understand, I golf the muni, so this is, I'm a little sneaky in the way that I can get Carter to spit out what I need him to put out in the public so that people can understand why we're doing what we're doing. Go ahead.
Thanks, Bruce. I think my question's been sort of satisfied. Thank you for Bruce for eliciting it, but thank you both for your information. As far as our subsidies or lack thereof in this case, not taking into account capital improvements. Yeah, I mean, I would agree that we should try to aim to recover above and beyond just the operating expenses, because for the points you just outlined. So yeah, no question. I just agree with that sentiment. Thank you.
Do you have anything else, Lima?
I don't believe so.
We are looking for direction. Mr. City Manager, what direction are you looking for?
Well, Mr. Mayor, thank you for that question. We are hopeful.
Do it.
We are hopeful that council is, at the very least, satisfied with the information that we've given you, the direction that we're heading. We'd like your blessing, of course, to bring an implementation strategy forward that takes our approach to the next level. And with your blessing, we will prepare to do just that.
I would assume that's okay with everyone at the table, yes? Okay. All right, looks like you are good to go.
Thank you.
That's a sly little thumbs up, but I'll take it.
I know.
Come on. I got you. Thank you, Zoe. Okay, moving on to the annual City of Casper Liquor Review and Report. Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and councilors. This is, for those of you who are new, this is a process you will anticipate having to go through every year. In that you are the licensing authority for every liquor license that's issued and every variety of liquor license that's issued within the limits of the city of Casper. And so part of your exercise in that regard is reviewing the year that we just got through to determine whether or not the performance that you're seeing with respect to your license holders is satisfactory, whether or not there are things you want to look into further. And historically, it's also been a time to question licenses that have been parked to determine if any action is needed during the review period that might elicit some activity with regard to those parked licenses. And some of you have been on the council for a while, remember exactly what I'm talking about as far as some of those types of instances are concerned. I'm here to tell you that, I don't see anything too far out of the ordinary with regard to the report that you have in front of you. I think the mayor made a really good point in our leadership meeting, kind of in preparation for this discussion today, as it relates to some of the compliance checks that occurred over the last year. I wish I could say that those failures are more of an anomaly than the routine, but indeed we do see failures in compliance checks throughout the year in a host of those who hold licenses and so on. But beyond that, the clerk's office is prepared to share some summary information with you, as is the police department, to walk you through some of the trends that they may be seeing that they want to bring to your attention. But by all means, the point of tonight's discussion is to elicit any questions that you might have so that we can walk through some of that data in preparation for your formal adoption of the renewals next Tuesday, right? Tuesday night. So with that, Mr. Mayor, I'd be happy to turn the time over to the clerk's office and then the PD, and of course, entertain any questions you might have there.
As you please, sir.
Thank you.
This is just information only, so I'm good to stay.
Absolutely. It is information only, absolutely.
Before we start into it, can I get a clarification on some of the acronyms that were used in the report?
Sure thing. If that's okay.
Of course,
with you,
yes,
sir.
please.
Getting saucy.
I like it. I figured that might be some of Mayor, Councilor, what are your?
I was interested, what's the difference between an accident PI versus an accident PD?
PD stands for property damage, PI is personal injury.
Okay. The other
Oh,
thing,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
the other one was, I noticed there were welfare checks and 911 welfare.
So 911 will come over they'll be through a 911 line.
Okay.
The other one would come into the non-emergency line. And that's how they get treated. So they're coded that way through dispatch. So if it
Okay.
comes in as a 911, somebody hits the 911 or they hit the star button, it'll come in through that line, and that's how it's.
Okay, so there's just basically it's more how somebody called it in versus severity or anything else then.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Is that it?
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
You didn't need to walk all the way up there.
We're ready for the clerk's office if you are, sir.
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
Let's do it.
Your Honor, members of council.
Thank you.
So the clerk's office doesn't have a big role in the liquor report. That's mainly PD, but from our side, we just go over the renewals, we accept them, and that's what you'll see next week. And you'll see our kind of report or in our memo. We didn't have anything special for the report because there was nothing really of concern. If we have any sales tax holes or anything, we don't currently. All of them are good there. We did have a couple that were late this year, but they made it in time, so they just had to pay the late fee. And they acknowledged that they knew they were going to be late and that they were going to have to pay the late fee, and they were okay with that. And we usually see that in some of the bigger corporations. And so we saw that the first year as well. And this year we had even less. I think it was just 2. So from the clerk side, everything looks good and pretty normal status quo.
Sir,
Mr. Mayor, do you mind if I elicit some information from the city clerk?
please.
Do you mind explaining the sales tax holds? It's a good thing that we don't have any in this particular round, but can you let our council know what that means and what that entails and what that implies for council?
So basically, throughout the year, everyone has to pay their sales tax, all the businesses. If they don't, the state puts them on hold. They let us know that somebody's on a sales tax hold, and then we have to bring it to you. So at renewal time, you'll see those. If anybody's on a sales tax hold, you can choose not to renew their license, but we don't. Usually we get a note that they're on sales tax hold. We let them know, they go and pay it and clear it up very quickly so they don't lose their liquor license.
That has happened in the past where their license has been put in abeyance until they clear up their obligations with the state. But we don't have that this time around.
Gotcha. Kyle?
Thank you, Bruce. I had a question about, because I'd heard multiple times there's nothing of note, and I recognize that the pandemic totally jacked up a lot of our data collection, but we weren't given historical context in this memo, and so I was curious about the 25 businesses that failed compliance check up from 15. That's a 67% increase. And then the amount of calls that the police responded to was 540 more. That's a 26.8% increase. Is that simply a return to norm, or that stood out to me? But again, I don't know what the historical norms are.
We'll turn that over to PD.
Thanks.
Mayor, councilors, I do believe it is just a return to norm.
Okay.
I noticed that in the report myself, so some of the stuff I wanted to bring to everybody's attention. If you look at the highlighted page here, I wrote some scribble down. Your DUIs in 2020 were 270. In 2021, they were 294. In 2022, they're 310. So you can see an uptick in all of that. The exciting piece about this is actually in 2020, we had 1,399 alcohol-related incidents. And here in 2022, they're down to 1,174, that's kind of what we're getting. It's a 7% decrease in alcohol-related crimes that are being reported. And some of these they're not specific to the alcohol license. You may have an auto burglary. Sometimes in the Albertsons parking lot, for example, if we do a traffic stop, sometimes it's CY Albertsons, and you'll see an increase in some of those numbers. Last year we did 23 traffic stops in front of CY Albertsons. This year we did 40. So those are going to, it's always a moving target when we're dealing with some of these reports.
Thank you.
Steve?
Well, and that was what I was going to ask, is basically you stop somebody speeding and they happen to stop in front of Albertsons, then that shows up here.
Correct.
Very good. The other thing I did note too that I think is an excellent decrease was the minor in possessions. There was a 66.7% decrease. So I'm glad to see that. So
Numerically in 2020 we had 92, and then we're now down to 22. So
yeah.
I brought up in leadership tonight, I'm shocked at the amount of businesses that still sell alcohol to minors. I don't understand. I literally don't understand how this continues to happen and how it's acceptable and has become acceptable. And when you say, well, it's not acceptable, we're going to sit here and renew every one of these licenses, knowing that they all failed in selling alcohol to minors. So to me, that means it's acceptable behavior. And to me, it's just not acceptable. We have somehow got to get to zero incidents of our liquor establishments selling to minors. It is not. I go into Albertsons and I want to buy some Captain Morgan. They ask me for my ID. I'm 57 years old, but it's their company policy. Somehow we've got to get everybody to go to this policy where they're asking for an ID. And then having the person asking for the ID know how to actually read it. Because people, I know when we do our stings, we hand them an ID that shows they're not legal. Okay, you're good. They didn't even look at the date, or they didn't do the math right. But somehow we've got to get to zero compliance, and this can't be acceptable anymore. We've got to put our foot down at some point. I don't know how we do that, but you're nodding. I'm assuming you agree with me.
I absolutely agree. Some of it's a business culture. You got to have some kind of monitor, if you will, that when somebody's coming in, it's an ID every time. Maybe double check that, do some math. I don't know what that plan would be. Everybody's going to be different, but you do know that employees change hands. Some people get busy, and then they get people back here. Lines stacked up, people start hurrying. So you're dealing with in a world of human dynamic, and people make mistakes. But be mindful of that. But at the same time, we got to get better at what we're doing as a society.
Kyle?
Thank you, Bruce. To that point, I did notice that it looks like all of those failed compliances and resulted in the parties pleading guilty and paying a $120 fine. Back when I waited tables, I thought it was a $750 fine, and so I am curious, what is our current, $120 fine? That's not much of a consequence.
if you're standing behind the counter, making $15 an hour, $120 is a
Well, I
pretty good
think
hit.
120 is to the business, right? Not to the employee. It's to the employee.
It's to the
Yeah.
one ourselves.
Okay.
I think the business one is stiffer, is it not,
These ones are to the employees.
Yeah. Steve?
I noticed that there were several of the establishments here, and this goes back to our alarm ordinance, but I noticed there were several of these establishments that had quite a few alarms. And are those some of the frequent flyers that we've been talking about, or are they actually having break-ins and issues?
Mayor, councilors, I would say that that's probably some of the frequent flyers we've had that since I've been here with the city. Those are just repeated. It could be an accident when punching the code to arm the alarm, any number of things that are setting it off.
Or
prompts of response.
are they starting to slow down at all?
It's still up for debate. We gotta get some more data on that.
Okay,
People are getting better at it.
okay.
As soon as I say that, then we'll have
And as a follow-up, I noticed that it seemed like there was an increase in disturbances. Are we just getting rowdier and more of the in-your-face, no compromise type things? Or is that an element of society that we're starting to see fester, so to speak, or?
Mayor, councilors, I would say that some of that really depends on the individual that's calling that call in. Oftentimes we get to the call, it's labeled as disturbance because we don't have, not quite rises to the level of a citizen assist of somebody needing to get into their car or something like that. It could be two people arguing, and once we get there, it's really not that, but we don't have another call or circumstance code other than a disturbance. So what will happen is it gets coded as a disturbance in our system, but the narrative that supports it may say something. It was just two disagreeing parties and they parted ways. Some of that is just how it's documented and captured in our system.
Okay, thank you.
Randy?
I hate to start with back in my day, but I will agree that back in my day, it was not $120. It was definitely significantly more than that at one point in time. But I think it was also before TIPS training, but I am noticing, while I fully agree contributing to a minor is not something I'm good with, there's not a lot of repeat offenders. So as a noob here, I will be excited to look at next year and see, because it might just be a matter of, okay, you did it, now here's what we're going to do moving forward. So I do think it's a good sign that it's not the same place every time.
I'd like to think it was partly educational, but I don't agree with that. I think in this day and age, especially when it comes to alcohol-related crimes, whether it's DUI, MIP, selling to a minor, I mean, everybody knows. There's literally no excuse anymore for it. And I guess that's what I find so frustrating. You know, I mean, even me, I'm not going to sit here and say I've never gone out and had a few drinks and didn't drive, but I can tell you I don't do it now. You know, there's Uber, there's a sober driver, whatever. I don't take those chances anymore. And but people do every day, and I get it. But the selling to minor things, we're dealing with such mental health stuff right now, and trying to find ways to help in that area, and minors' brains aren't even ready for this kind of stuff yet. So it just bothers me so much. Go ahead, Lisa.
Just on this topic, but just unrelated, are you seeing an uptick in hit and runs?
And what? Sorry.
Hit and
Hit and
runs.
runs.
Just in
Mayor,
general?
councilors, yeah, I can't, but it comes with the weather, right? Some kids are driving, hit something, don't want to report it. But I don't really understand what the consequences of that are. So when weather conditions are inclement, we see a lot more hit and runs because people are not driving appropriately or driving above their ability, if you will, speeding, too fast for conditions, things like that. So again, that's a moving target when it's depending on the year. Sometimes we have more accidents in the summertime than we do when it's weather like this. It's really kind of in Casper. I don't know
Go
if I
ahead.
truly answered your question.
Thanks, Bruce. I'm curious because this is what the second or third year that a lot of us have looked through these, and I'm just curious if there's so we collect this data, is there any sort of place where we can put it? I'm thinking of like Pete's dynamic charts that he had where we can, change information and spit out graphs and stuff like that. To me, it's a weakness that we're having to rely on anecdotes from our police department or us on council trying to remember who were the people that did really poorly on these last year. I can't even remember, and I know I went through it with a fine-tooth comb. So I'm just curious, is there any way, if we're collecting this data, to also give us kind of historical trends where we can be able to tweeze out, okay, this person's had problems for 3, 4, 5 years in a row. That's one that, speaking about needing to kind of address the folks that are doing worst at this, getting these every year one at a time, I don't, it's very difficult for me to be able to pick up on that. So
with that said, would there be an opportunity to get Keto Pete to do some charting for us?
Mr. Mayor, you were encouraging him, weren't you? Look at him.
Sir?
He's over there.
He thought
rubbing his
he,
hands.
he thought I forgot.
And I'm not advocating that Pete
I
spend.
am an elephant.
I don't want Pete to have to spend dozens of hours plugging this all into a spreadsheet. I'm more curious if we're already collecting the data. Is there a program that we can feed it all into that can just do that all automatically for us without Pete having to just break his back over spreadsheets?
Actually, my guess is Mr. Meyer would enjoy that opportunity to build some trending data that you're kind of. I think that's a good idea actually, and I bet we could put something together.
Because I think you're right, Kyle. I think if we had a 4 or 5 year spreadsheet that showed the same business repeat offending over and over and over again, then we'd have something a little more tangible to.
Just year to year. It's
yeah,
difficult
absolutely. I agree. Keto Pete, what do you think? This is informal work session, by the way.
Mr. Mayor.
Thank
you. No, I'm certain that we can do things, and I don't want to. Also, I don't want to sell short the resources of the police department. They've got analysts as well. Robert Grant is also very talented as far as pulling things together. But I'm sure we could all work together and come up with something that could look what you described.
But we'd appreciate it if you could look into it. And I don't think you would mind at all on the side of the police department, would you, Deputy? Sure. Thank you. Okay. Do we have anything else with this liquor review and report, sir? Or do you have anything else, Chief? Okay. Mr. City Manager.
I think that's it.
That was information only, so. Okay, very good.
That you just feed it into.
Before I move on, did anybody else have any other questions concerning the review and report? Because that'll come next week and we will be approving as it's in the packet. So are there any other questions or any concerns that we need to address before moving on? Okay, very good. So let's move on to interim topics for WHAM, Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilors, this is the opportunity that we discussed. It may be as long as a month ago now, pertaining to our preparation work we will need to do for the next legislative session. Kind of ironic, we're not even through the current legislative session right now. As far as developing a list of interim topics that would represent your interests, as it were, for summer assignment to committees and potentially with sponsors' help and so on. You'll notice in your list, you essentially have 3 components that make up the topics for discussion this evening. One of which, of course, would be topics that ostensibly would be repeated from your previous council to see if you want to continue those dialogue elements into the next legislative session. The other segment, if you will, are topics that staff would have you consider as being endorsed of this body to move forward to either support by WHAM or support by individual sponsors, and hopefully committees would also pick up on. And then you have topics that members of your body submitted for consideration as potential dialogue points, again, either at the level of WHAM or at the level of individual sponsorship. But at the end of the day, we want to be sure that the list that moves forward is embraced by this group and directives for us to sort of carry as we, again, go into the summer, committee discussions and in preparation for next January. So with that, Mr. Mayor, if I may.
And keeping in mind the way he's presented this, you will need a majority of the folks at the table in order for it to go forward from here. Just so we're aware. So whatever topics you bring, you'll have to have that majority for the council to present that in a manner that is acceptable to go forward to WHAM or what have you. So,
and I would say, Mr. Mayor, if indeed there are topics on this list that don't have a majority thumbs, they won't make it to the resolution, which we would adopt when, Jolene, the final resolution of the agenda, legislative agenda?
Mayor, councilors, we have two going on. The first one is the 24th of February, where we have sponsors for the interim topics, whether we get a legislative sponsor or not. The second bite at the apple, if you will, unless you want tonight to be the final. If you recall, the way this works for WHAM, this is kind of a clumsy, we're going to try and explain this, it's kind of clumsy. So we're getting a little bit ahead of the WHAM convention, the summer convention. As you recall, we go down there, we represent the resolutions we want brought forward that we want WHAM to concentrate on for the upcoming session.
That council wants.
That
right.
Council wants to take to WHAM, and then WHAM gets together, we have our representatives, and they vote on what the WHAM agenda is going to be for resolutions. But because we have a deadline to get a legislative sponsor, we also do an interim, if you will. So this is where we as a city look and say, what do we want to go after individual legislators to sponsor? Is it an interest of WHAM? Was it on WHAM's list, for example, last year and it didn't get through, so will they help us get a sponsor? Is there another organization such as WASCOP that we want to work with to try and get in? But this is the first look at interim topics to have in by the 24th to try and find a legislative sponsor by the 24th. Am I being clear on what I mean by legislative sponsor? We cannot put an interim topic forward unless an elected senator or House of Representative sponsors our topic and takes it to committee. From their leadership selects it could be kicked out of committee at that point too.
okay. So with that, we will, I assume, open up the floor to Steve.
In the very first one, it talks about vulnerable persons and professions. What would a vulnerable profession be?
Teacher, counselor, coach,
referee.
Okay.
I remember looking at that.
nurse,
Frontline nurse.
Sorry, Mayor.
No, by all means, right? Thank you very much. I was just adding on to what you were saying because I remember reading the list.
Okay. No, we're good.
Okay, go ahead, Amber.
To what extent, Jolene, Carter, do you think that there's maybe 12 things on the list of proposals here? To what extent do you think that we need to pare this down and prioritize them? I mean, realistically, how many interim topics do you think we should get on our short list? I feel like we had like 4 last time, 4, 5, 6. I can't remember.
I believe we had 5 or 6. If I'm recalling, mayor, councilors, I believe we had 5 or 6 on there.
Okay.
This is an interesting list, if you will. Some of it has to do with laws that are not in place for our police to enforce and to make them more effective. And a good share of these came from our police department in what they're seeing. So, maybe that's where we see what we can do with WASCOP. I'm not really sure what to say. Yeah, it's always easier if we have 1 or 2, but that might not be practical for the needs of what we have across the city.
I would assume, in talking with Carter, we probably need to get it down to about 5.
From like a bandwidth standpoint, right?
I would agree.
So, with that, I'm having a little bit of a problem pulling up the list. What do you have in the right? Oh, there it is. Okay, so one of the things we need to do as a council then is to narrow this list down to 5 to present a unified council front to WHAM, which will then in turn try to find sponsors to get these moving forward. The floor is open, Kyle.
Yeah. I guess I'm not following the need to narrow it down to 5 since some of these resolutions, so I'm looking at this article from June of last year. A lot of these are the same resolutions, and so last year at least 6 were from here, 4 were from Jackson Hole, 1 from Cheyenne, Cody, Hartville, and Lingle. And so some of these resolutions are coming out of other municipalities, and I think we should support them even if they don't necessarily address anything in our community. And so I guess I'm not following the rationale to limit it to 5 since some of these resolutions are for other communities. You know, this is a WHAM. Well, I guess this isn't WHAM specific though.
No, this is Casper City Council specific.
Okay.
Going to specific
Going,
legislators.
Yeah, we are going to
bring
our
them
legislators
forward.
to bring forward to WHAM on behalf of the city of Casper, just like Jackson will, just like Rock Springs will, just like Lander will.
Yes.
So this is specific to us.
And then the other one that
Correct.
Jolene was talking
Yeah.
about, if I understood it right, would be then going to WHAM.
So
For
when
that
WHAM
list
drafts
that
all
you've got
their
there.
resolutions, that will also come back to city council and we jump on board with the resolutions WHAM sets. Okay.
Correct.
All right.
Yes, sir.
All right.
Yep. So these are just from the ones that our city council wants to get behind.
Okay.
And the problem is if you over liquidate it, then you end up, so.
Sure. Hard to find other sponsors.
Exactly. Yeah, you've got to find sponsors within our districts that are willing to.
And as a reminder, next year will be a budget session, so it's gonna be even harder to bring non-budgetary items. Another reason to limit what we want.
I'll throw out one that I'm particularly
Please.
excited about. There's several on the list, but I think increased municipal revenue strategy is a drum I will continue to beat to put emphasis to the state on the need for municipalities to have options.
Of course, okay, absolutely. Yeah, I would agree with that one, and I would support that 100%.
The very first one on the list is one I'm after, and we literally, as a council, worked our tails off with several people over a 2-year period to get something drafted to help protect people in our community. And to me, it's just very important that we take this a step further and become not one of 2 states that don't have something. So it's really important for me.
Is that a discrimination?
It's a non-discrimination ordinance, just under different verbiage, really.
Has some elements of it, I would say. It's not exactly the same. It doesn't serve exactly the same function. This is something that do we have it as an interim topic or just a bill draft? I mean, it's not a new topic. They've considered it. I've testified on it 2 years ago.
But I think if we can get the door open somehow,
Yep.
we can kind of start the conversation on a much bigger level. So it's important to me. It doesn't mean it has to be important to everybody else. I'm just throwing it out there as one of them. And then we'll prioritize everything afterwards. Go ahead, Lisa.
I have a question on the local government authority to adopt state liquor rules. What is that?
Your Honor.
Please.
Counselors. So basically, the way the liquor license or the liquor laws work is the state has their rules, the state statutes, and then we have to adopt our own. And so certain elements of Wyoming state statutes allows local governments to just say, we adopt the state rules. Liquor does not provide that. So we have to do is go in and write ours. So then as they change theirs, we have to go in and change ours, even if they mirror. So for example, if they say hours of operation have to be here 8 to 5, and we have it in hours, they go and change theirs, so it no longer says that, we would have to go and amend our ordinances. We can't just say we adopt the state liquor rules here.
Oh.
And so we just want that ability to adopt theirs, so every time they change theirs, we don't have to go back and do everything again as well.
Bruce. Sir. Sorry, Kyle.
You're right. Thanks for that information, Floor. Another one I don't have much information on is restoration of DCI funding, and so I was curious if maybe the deputy chief or someone could speak a little more to that one.
I don't really know that I can offer any insight to that one. I'm not sure if that's pertaining to additional funds to get additional TFOs up there or anything, or something like that, which is our task force officers that are temporarily assigned there. I think we're going to a 3-year rotation.
Is that something that the chief brought to you? Because it's staff, yeah?
Yeah. Mr. Mayor, if I may,
Yes,
elaborate just a touch. Deputy Chief got it basically right. The idea is that in order for those partnerships, particularly when you're talking about drug trafficking and some of those interdiction type activities that we do in partnership with DCI, they have pulled back on funding historically. We're hoping that that investment can be restored so that those local partnerships can be replenished and you know, made more whole, if you will, from what it used to be. And that's essentially it. And there's some narrative there.
Down towards the bottom of our list, there's established law against neglectfully busing problem individuals to other jurisdictions. We're going to have difficulty getting other communities to join that fight with us because we are the community that they're busing them to. So, go ahead, Chief.
I would, Mayor, councilors, I don't disagree with the premise behind that. I think there's a little more work to make that work. We do have resources here in Casper and Natrona County that other smaller jurisdictions do not have. So some of that might rise to the level of an MOU before you send somebody to us. What is this person's, you know, what is their history? What have they done in your community? How long are we going to house them? What are we going to do? What does that look like?
Well, what does the funding model look like that you're going to help? And that's what's most important to me. They're coming in on these one-way bus tickets and literally just dumping them off here, and then they become our problem. They strain our social services and everything else. And so if we had something in place where we could at least recoup funding from these other communities, that would certainly be helpful. So I don't know if that's exactly what that is, but I'm assuming it's going to tie in one way or the other, right?
Mr. Mayor, we've got a couple very tangible cases that we're dealing with right now through the court system and certainly with PD, wherein folks have been sent here that don't even know why they're being sent here, simply so that the burden that they pose to their sending community is no longer their burden but ours. And so we're not talking about, you know, soft handoffs where folks are being sent here because there's medical services that they know they're being sent here for, and we're aware of it, we know who they are, et cetera. We're typically talking about folks who have problematic histories in their community that are causing them service issues and so on, that are simply being put on a bus without a full understanding as to why they're being put on a bus and being brought here where in many cases they're not even eligible to receive sheltering services through our rescue mission.
So they end up homeless.
And then they end up just simply with no service availability and become, frankly, more of a public safety hazard.
And that other community doesn't care because they're not there to deal with them anymore.
Exactly.
Go ahead, Amber.
I would like to see if we could get some traction on that. That conversation is going to take a long time. It's very complex. There's a lot going on there. And so I think interim topic is the right place for it. And I think that it may take us more than one interim topic to have any, you know, something that feels workable. So I think we should get that started as soon as possible.
Agreed. Vice Mayor.
Along those same lines, I think we need to start having those conversations about appropriations for mental health services in the same context of what we're talking about busing problems, et cetera. I think that's going to have to be something that we need to send a message to the state legislature to say, hey, look, we need dollars towards mental health issues. It's going to be one of our goals. I think that's aligns really well with what we do.
I agree with you, and we're currently investing collaboratively our opioid money in order to start addressing some of this stuff. So if we could get some state funding and you know, grow that program, that's a great way to do it. So with state funding. So I'm with you, Ray. I agree. Well, there's 5 right there. So I don't mind if we have more, and then we can always, whittle it down, if you will. So far, just to give you an example where we're at, enhanced penalties for crimes, increased municipal revenue strategy, local government authority to adopt state liquor rules, appropriations for mental health services, and establish law against the busing problem. That's what I have marked so far. So if there's something else on that list that we need to talk about or want to talk about, now would be the time.
I think those are good ones for directly to our people, because as has been stated, some of those very directly affect us, and not necessarily the rest of them, and they're going to take some time. Several of these others are basically carryovers from WHAM from last year, and maybe if they try to carry the water again, because they are then more statewide issues like local revenue strategies. I mean, the small towns and, well, everybody needs more local authority from that standpoint. The missing persons the same way.
Well, so is the decriminalizing cannabis. You're going to have cannabis. You're not going to get the support with this council, but Jackson Hole is going to push it.
Oh yeah.
Rock Springs is going to push it. So
Kyle's going to push it.
I was going to say, I would love to take the opportunity to convince this council.
You're welcome to try, because this is the opportunity for you to do that.
Could I jump in super fast?
Yes.
So could I get a little bit more understanding of the municipal option for publishing minutes online? Just super fast. I'm sorry, because I know you're gonna.
No, I'm interested in that too.
The short answer is giving Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry.
No.
Giving municipalities the opportunity to use online publications as the means of posting minutes and legals and so on, versus only having the resource of the newspaper available to them.
Thereby saving that $70,000.
Right.
That's a good expense saving.
I
like that actually.
Well, your smaller communities are going to push that one anyway, because they can't afford it anymore. We can.
I was going to say, to me, that one, yes, it needs to be done, but to me, that's more of a statewide that WHAM and everybody else should be behind.
And they will be.
Yeah. So I don't see that we should, so to speak.
Lisa?
I'm good.
Okay. Kyle?
I mean, since I'm the one that added it to the list, I feel like it warrants a discussion. But I totally understand Jackie's point. Next year's a budget year, so we should be focusing on things that, have a close relationship with the budget. However, I would make the argument that decriminalization of cannabis would impact the budget. Over half of all people in Wyoming prisons are there for revocation of their probation or parole, the vast majority of which simply failed their UA. And so you could make the argument that half the people in Wyoming prisons are there for a substance use. It could be as simple as possession or personal use of a substance. And so when you take into account that's $35,000 to $50,000 a year per individual, there's a ton of cost savings that I think could be realized through that. And even our own state legislature did a study a year or two ago that showed, I think it was $70 million in potential revenue through legalization, which is slightly different. But, and so, yeah, I guess on that point, I kind of said all what I wanted to say at the last point, but I guess I would be very receptive to feedback from my colleagues on why we should be laxing laws in regards to liquor and alcohol, while at the same time, clutching our pearls anytime we even talk about decriminalization of cannabis. I would be very curious to hear from my colleagues why they would support laxing liquor laws and maintaining the status quo in regards to cannabis.
Can I answer you?
Yeah. Anyway.
No, I'm not interested in laxing liquor laws. I just sat in this chair 10 minutes ago and said something needs to be done about the checks that these businesses are failing. So I'm not interested in laxing them. I'm interested in tightening them up a little bit. And also, when you take cannabis and you put it against alcohol, and you quote all the alcohol, which I don't know what the exact number is. I want to say 95% of most major crimes
come from 40% in our county.
Come from some sort of substance abuse.
Mm-hmm.
If you add another mind-altering drug, just like alcohol is, and just like marijuana is, those numbers are gonna start increasing regardless. So to me, I just don't think we need, is it better than alcohol? You can debate that with me all you want. Don't know, don't care, because it's illegal and alcohol is legal. So I can't have that debate with you, but I can tell you, I know that not everything from cannabis is good. And so if it's gonna strain our social services even more, then I have to be against it, at least right now, until we get more information. Medically, I know there's properties that are extremely helpful, and so I'm on the fence medically. I just don't know. But right now I just can't get behind it, and it's really unfair. I've never even tried it, so my kids swear, Dad, you'd be the best if you would just do it. And I'm like, so as embarrassed as I am to say, but it's not something I can get behind. Steve.
The thing that I was going to bring up with the cannabis is alcohol. If my drilling crew shows up on a drilling rig and I can smell alcohol, I've got a breathalyzer that if he doesn't pass or is not willing to blow, he's not climbing the derrick, he's not getting on the floor, he's not going to get somebody hurt because of altered state. I have nothing for marijuana. And when you're dealing with 90-foot joints of 4.5-inch drill pipe that weighs 16 pounds a foot, and drill collars that weigh 100 and some pounds a foot, and casing and all of the moving machinery. Look at the mining industry's track record on safety. It sucks. And that's where I'm coming from, is I don't want to be in a situation where people that I have to deal with, that I'm standing next to, aren't capable of thinking appropriately. And and you can smell the alcohol. I can test him. You can look at him. No, dude, you can't even walk a straight line on the floor. I'm not having you be my derrick hand today. Just go. And we don't run them off a location, because that's then putting a drunk on the highway. You go to the quarters that are here on location, go to bed, we'll deal with you tomorrow. But basically, you're done. I've got no way of dealing with that with marijuana or with any of the other illegal drugs.
1 second. Just to add on to that, one of the questions I would ask you, Kyle, is my company operates under the FMCSA, so we pre-employ drug test, we post-accident, we random test them. And if they have smoked marijuana within the last 30 days, it'll show up on the test. If they've drank and they've had 8 hours off, it's out of their system. It doesn't show. So I guess that's why I see alcohol is different, because if you can go sleep it off and wake up tomorrow and you're back to yourself, compared to if 30 days later it's still in your system, whether you admit it or not, it's got to have some effect on you if it's still in your system. Otherwise, it wouldn't show. So go ahead, please.
Thank you. I would love to address a couple of these points, and I'm also happy to have coffee outside the realm of this meeting. I don't want our whole night. I don't want to have to keep all city staff just because I'm very passionate about this. But you made a comment about if it was decriminalized or legalized, it would result in an increased use. I would posit it back to you that most of the people that smoke cannabis, whether it's illegal or legal, they're already doing it. It's the same with, so I take a very harm reduction approach to substance use, and that's the same rationale folks use to prevent syringe exchange programs from getting offline. They think, hey, if you provide these free syringes, people are just going to start using intravenous drugs all the time because you're making this resource available. That's not true. Anyone that's using intravenous drugs is doing it already. They're just using dirty needles a lot of the time as opposed to clean needles. All of the research that shows Colorado after legalization, they did increase adult usage 1 to 2 percentage points, but actually high school use went down a percentage point, a decade low the year after legalization in Colorado. So I think there's plenty of research to make the argument that when you legalize, regulate, and tax the industry, you actually make it harder for youth to access that, because currently they're getting all of those drugs off the black market, and drug dealers do not check IDs, in my experience. And so when you're regulating, taxing, and legalizing, you can read into that however you'd like. But I think the research shows that when you legalize, regulate, and tax that industry, it has positive effects for youth use, although you do see a 1 to 2% increase among adults. But I would argue that the people that want to do it are already doing it. It's pretty accessible. If you drive across the border to Colorado, stop at the first dispensary you see, tell me how many Wyoming license plates you see in the parking lot. Except they're paying, all of our residents are paying the 25 tax down there. So Colorado is reaping all the rewards of our residents' cannabis use. Steve, you mentioned not having a field test for cannabis. That's a huge issue as far as trying to determine when people are under the influence while driving. In Colorado, it's 0.05 nanograms of THC in their system. That's the level that they determine you are inebriated to the point that you shouldn't be behind the wheel. That's not a perfect science, but I would posit back to you. Do you have any field tests for methamphetamine, cocaine, fentanyl, heroin, or any of the other drugs other than alcohol?
You've got to start someplace, though.
Sure. If somebody looks like they're under the influence, I think it's a good idea not to let them operate heavy machinery, regardless of whether you can measure that from a scientific standpoint or not.
Fair.
And I think there was one other one that was one other question that was posited to me, but yeah, I guess I would say the reason I'm interested in us advocating, I'm not interested in Casper doing something exclusively. I think the vast majority of the problems Colorado had with their legalization was because they legalized in a vacuum. They were the only place in the country that did it, and that's why you saw this increase in transient folks. That's why you saw the increase in traffic and housing prices. They had lots of negative effects. Anybody that claims cannabis legalization had zero negative effects, they're not being truthful to you. And even folks that say it's a silver bullet solution to every chronic health condition, they're lying to you as well. It's a drug, and it has negative impacts. People absolutely get into bad habits and use it as a negative coping skill. And so I totally accept that reality. I don't think it's a silver bullet solution, but I do argue that if you are looking at the research and trying to determine the level of societal impact drugs have, alcohol is leaps and bounds more dangerous, has more negative impacts than cannabis. And so I don't think you can make a logical argument to support legalization, continued legalization of alcohol, and yet complete illegalization of cannabis. And so I guess that's what I stand.
So I don't necessarily disagree with Kyle. I'm just not in this spot. I'm gonna be a thumbs down on supporting it to go to the state for us to do that. And I don't necessarily disagree, because I agree that there's some level of benefit behind it to some extent. I don't think the state's going to take this on. I think this is something that the state will turn down. I think we've got more of a chance of getting Medicaid expansion than we do decriminalizing cannabis right now. I think that's going to be down the road. I think Medicaid expansion is far more important than decriminalizing cannabis. So I'd rather put my name on the line for Medicaid expansion rather than decriminalizing cannabis at this point. So that's kind of where I'm at. I don't think it's something that the state wants to take on. I think this is a budget session, maybe in a couple of years. Do I think in 5 to 10 years, Wyoming will change and decriminalize it? Probably. I think eventually it'll happen, but I just think we're not there yet. And I think there's a lot of data, even talking to the police, there's a lot of data suggesting that there are some issues in Colorado that would refute some of those issues that Kyle had brought up. And I can't name specific things, so I won't even go down that road.
And I have rebuttals to them. So. I've heard them before.
But I also know that there's a lot of police officers and people in law enforcement that are very passionate about not legalizing it, and have said a lot about that, and are very passionate about saying, hey, we need to do that. We've got a problem with liquor. We've got a problem with alcohol. There's no question about that. And those things need to be curtailed majorly. How we do that, and our whole entire society revolving around alcohol. The level of people dying from alcoholism is at a high rate, highest rate probably in all of our history. And so we are at that point. And so I hear everything that he's saying, that Kyle is saying, but I just can't support it at this point.
I do too, and I don't want to discount anything you're feeling or or thinking. That's not what it's about for me. What I would like to do, and because we could debate this all night, is I would like to find out if there, because we have 5 items that we have talked about and kind of picked. This one makes 6. So the easiest way for me to do this would say, do we have a majority of this council that would be, what?
You can finish your statement.
Do we have a
first.
majority of this council that would be interested in getting behind the cannabis issue? So I guess in other words, give me a thumbs up if the cannabis is something you're interested in having as one of our topics to go to WHAM. So 3.
You don't have them.
No? Okay. So you don't have a majority. So we're going to take that off the list and move forward with the other 5.
Can I, though, real quick before
Yes.
you point out? You made a comment about this council not being friendly to alcohol. I would disagree with that. Last year, we supported WHAM's resolutions, which have been debated in this session. And I think they're still working through them. But as far as the creation of an entertainment and tavern license and also reconfiguring the amount of bar and grill licenses, we took a position, this council took a position on those WHAM resolutions to give us more bar and grill licenses and to create an entirely new liquor license for entertainment and tavern. And so I would push back on that and say this council has been very friendly to alcohol.
Let me clarify what I meant when I said that. I wouldn't care if every single business had a liquor license. Wouldn't bother me a bit. You want to drink in your home, you want to drink in your business, do it. What I was talking about was more not loosening regulations to allow them serving minors, DUI, curbside pickup packaged liquor like we were doing during COVID. You could literally pull up to a bar and they would bring you a ready-made drink and hand it to you through your window in your car. Baloney. Sorry, I'm against those kind of things. Open containers in vehicles create drinking while driving. It's just a bad idea. And I'm a drinker. I mean, I have some drinks. There's no doubt about it. So that's what I meant by that, Kyle. Sure. I wouldn't care if we had enough liquor license. So no matter where you ate, no matter where you congregated, if you wanted to have a drink, you could do so. I don't have an issue with that. Go ahead.
And with that point is, and I'm going to step in, is just that my issue with alcohol is then there goes the domestic violence. And so our domestic violence is up. And so you keep feeding alcohol to everybody. I guarantee people who are smoking marijuana are not beating on anybody, but all of the alcohol, you have all of the domestic violence. So that does increase on women and children.
That's probably true. Go ahead.
Don't forget me this time.
I did.
Okay, I have 2 points. First of all, I'm new, Kyle, and if you were starting to bring something forward about making alcohol more strict, I would probably support you on that. So just so you know. Second of all, before we decide on 5, I feel like the DCI falls into our area of our goals also. So before we decide to we didn't get a whole lot of detail on it, but I do feel like if we can get state funding for DCI, that does help with our council goals moving forward with the mental health and the homelessness and our opioid money. So thought maybe I'd say maybe we should think about putting that one on there too, even if it's 6, unless 5 is your hard number.
Mr. Mayor, we certainly do have a precedent of taking, 6. I think 6 was our number last year that we brought forward. The challenge always is finding the amount of sponsors that we need to kind of carry the water on some of these, as well as trying to get all of them in through the WHAM filters that potentially would end up on their legislative agenda as well. And so being nimble is kind of our goal as it relates to the legislative push you want to see happen. But 6 probably wouldn't kill it for us.
If I did have to leave one off, it would probably be the DCI one because we have such a fantastic police department, and if that's going to pass, we're going to get the benefits of it anyway. So
yeah. The thing we do have to.
Sorry, Amber.
Oh, go ahead,
right,
Amber. Go ahead, Amber.
Maybe I can suggest that we move forward 6, and then staff can just get a sense for what's seeming to have legs and what doesn't. If we need to drop one, we can't find a sponsor, we feel like it's not going to be work the squeeze to try to put the effort into finding a sponsor, we can drop it, but we can at least ask.
Would that be appropriate?
Oh, sure, absolutely.
Steve?
I would stick with the DCI put on here because they did get cut. Our chief, vice chief, or assistant chief.
Deputy chief?
Deputy chief, I'll get it right, anyhow. Chief Cheney. But DCI helps with the drug cases particularly. We've been told that Wyoming, I-80, Casper is becoming more and more of a hub. They also do all of the investigation in police-involved incidents. Those are going up. They also check out, if I believe I'm correct, they check out all of the concealed carry permits that they go from the sheriff's office to DCI. So all of those go through there. So they do have a pretty good sized workload. And with the funding cuts they got, we need to get back up to par.
Well, would everybody be okay with moving those 6 forward on Amber's suggestion and kind of seeing where that washes out? Would that be okay with everybody? Yeah, okay.
So, Mr. Mayor, do you mind reading the list of 6?
Enhance penalties for crimes involving vulnerable person and professions, increased municipal revenue strategy, local government authority to adopt state liquor rules, restoration of Department of Criminal Investigation funding, appropriations for mental health services as prevention for violent crime and homelessness, and finally, establish law against neglectfully busing problem individuals to other jurisdictions.
Do you mind if I go ahead? All right. Yeah.
Respectfully, Mayor, councilors, I think it would be easy if we could to add municipal option to publish minutes online.
If we're going to stick to 6, we're not going to add that because that is something that the other communities are going to be after. Trust me, if we can't afford the $70,000, neither can every other smaller community. So I think that's going to get done without our needing to push on it. And if we only get 6 priority-wise, I think we've picked our 6 that are most important to this particular council.
I think that would potentially be one to go in that second round for the WHAM business, which is more of a statewide issue.
My guess is because Mills started that, you're going to see every smaller community that can't afford $70,000 to publish go after that. And I think you're going to see that pass before anything else. Okay.
I guess the only thing I would say to that is Casper is unique in Wyoming in the sense that we are the bigger city, the metropolitan city. They don't all have $70,000 in cost to publish online. The newspaper absolutely has a value in the more rural communities. And so I think for the more rural communities, it does make sense for them to continue publishing to the newspaper because they might not even have a city website to publish to. And so they need to be publishing somewhere. In Casper, we have the luxury of having Oil City News, K2 Radio, Casper Star Tribune. We have many outlets that cover city activity that we could publish to online. Not every rural community in the state has something like that, an alternative. So I'm not so sure they're going to take this up. The Wyoming Press Association is very strong. And so in order to pass something like this, I do think it will be municipalities having to be very aggressive about it. In this session this year, it came up, and because of the lobbying efforts of the Wyoming Press Association, the bill got watered down to the point that last I saw it, they just had to, wherever you publish to the newspaper, they also have to put it online, not behind a paywall. So that was essentially the bill that looks like it's going to pass through, is you have to publish online and not behind a paywall, which is good. It's a step in the right direction because that was one of my big beasts with the Trib is everything was behind a paywall, but they're just very effective at lobbying. And so it will require a very cohesive effort on the part of municipalities.
Well, I'll tell you what we'll do then. We originally said we were going to do 5. Now we're up to 7. So but we agreed on 6.
Well, I think that's flexible. I don't see,
we agreed on 5. We're already at 6. Now we're at 7.
Well,
I almost think we ought to have to, in fairness, like I said, trying to find sponsors, we've got to be really careful about what we're picking. We can't just throw them all out there and we're not going to end up with sponsors. And then one of the ones you really wanted isn't going to get picked up. And one of the ones it was on the tail end of that, you know what I mean? So we do have to be a little bit careful and diligent, I believe, don't you?
Yes.
Okay, so if we want that one in, something's gotta give. What is it?
I would say to remove either the increased municipal revenue strategy, which I think that one is most definitely gonna be everybody, small towns included. So that could come into the WAM, or being able to adopt the state liquor rules. You know, Jackson ought to be in favor of that. Cheyenne ought to be in favor of that. Every community that has liquor should be in favor of that.
Well, and I do understand the need to not want to go in and change that every time they change their rules, but there's a lot of things on this list that are a hell of a lot more important to me, like our homeless and our mental health and things like that.
Well, yeah, that's one of the ones you had said we were gonna do.
Well,
so that's why I said.
I feel like we're speculating a lot on what other communities might bring up if they don't find a sponsor, or if this isn't on their list, right? Then have we lost our chance? Like WAM can take forward into the interim the things that have already established sponsors by municipalities, right? They can't. The deadline is a deadline.
Mayor, councilors, we have 2 bites at the apple. This is very, very clumsy process. So our first one right now is the prime one. This is to get a legislative sponsor that WAM will kind of help us with, maybe, but Casper's going to go after it big time. We'll start making calls. That's our first bite. Mm-hmm. The second bite comes for summer convention. So shortly, I believe it's March, April, we bring our resolutions, which I'm assuming we bring some of these forward again to support them even more, but maybe add the little ones that we're talking about, like the newspaper one for the WAM part, and right now go after the really big stuff with sponsors. For example, the increased revenue, we want to go straight to revenue committee again, and to looking at who from our Natrona County delegation is on the revenue committee and ask, will you sponsor this? So 2 bites, but it's kind of clumsy. So yes, we want to pick the ones that we want to go after right now for legislative sponsor. And then the second bite at the apple, if you will, would be with our WAM convention of what they take forward and do some summer work on. Sometimes they're successful, sometimes they're not. And then we can add a few more to that if that makes sense.
I think there's still a question, which is if we don't get a legislative sponsor for some of these things by the deadline, WAM has a mechanism to get sponsors later? Is that
yes,
what I'm hearing?
Mayor, councilors, yes, it's not as effective.
Okay.
Getting it in at this bite at the apple with our legislators and the leadership, because remember, they come and they'll say get sponsors, the sponsorship goes forward, and then leadership picks, the legislative leadership picks what goes to committee or not and what priority it is on committee. So let's talk about the revenue. So let's say we get a sponsor, but it doesn't make it to the leadership's priority list. The second bite at that apple is WAM and the full membership coming forward again, and they'll go straight to committee, in that case, the revenue committee, and try and work it and see if it could be a committee bill from that end. So yes, again, this is very clumsy and to try and figure this out and explain it. So yes, but we're most effective right now if we can find a legislative sponsor right now.
Right. So how hard would it be, Carter, if we did do it? What Amber has suggested is, if let's say we give you 7 right now, let's say we give you the 7, staff takes it, you guys look at it, and you guys bet a little more, and you say, we don't think we're going to get this, and we can kind of push that aside and come back with 4 or 5. Is that a possibility, or are you worried, kind of what Bruce is saying, hey, look, we're going to stick to our 5 and 6, and we're going to go for our best shot? Does that make sense?
I would, Mr. Mayor, if I may, I would definitely say that trying to understand what your top priorities from this larger list are is really helpful for us. Number one, yes, we will be able to track down some legislators and see if we can get them to help us carry that water. The good news is, if indeed we just can't find any legislators to pick up a thing or two, because there will be some that have some traction and some that just don't, we can put together a resolution that we can forward to WHAM and say, hey, we think this needs to be a part of your legislative agenda. That does carry some punch, and take another route, if you will, in trying to get some traction for items that may not be doing that at this point in time. So it won't be a totally lost cause.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead.
So with that in mind, I think we should spend our time determining what truly is the most important and not give thought to who might also be bringing what other things in and letting that influence our decision. I think we should just pick the things that are most critical to us and do those.
And Mr. Mayor, if I could add real quick to the councilor's point, we will commit to you that of the ones that we just can't get off the ground from a legislative sponsorship standpoint, we will come back to you and say, hey, would you consider writing a resolution that still carries the weight of this council to WHAM and go that route? We can make that commitment.
And if I understand this process correctly, we have to make a decision on our top 5 priorities tonight, because that will be on our agenda to approve next Tuesday. Is that correct?
Mayor, councilors, yes, by minute action, it will be approved.
Yeah. So,
well,
there isn't a, and then come back to this is it.
What am I missing?
I say we go with the 7.
That's what I'm
Let
just thinking
Jolene
of doing,
work
but
her
what am I
magic.
missing? I have enhanced penalties,
you got
increased
this.
municipal revenue, local authority for state liquor, restoration, DCI, appropriations for mental health. Oh, the minutes. Where is that?
Municipal option to publish minutes on.
Oh, there it is. Okay. All right. So I guess if we're all in favor of shooting the 7 of them and letting the chips fall where they may, give me a thumbs up. Okay. Looks like you have your 7.
Thank you very much.
And the reason I gave it a thumbs down is I think 7's too many.
I do too, Steve, but
Okay.
I would rather send 7 and let WHAM figure it out before I only send 5, I guess. And like he said, we can always send another resolution from the council itself on the ones that they didn't pick up, and send a resolution to WHAM on behalf of the council for the remaining 2 or 3 that didn't get picked up. So
But this isn't going to WHAM. This is going to our legislators.
right, correct. But what will go to WHAM is whatever our legislators don't pick up.
And I think what could happen too is we send them the 7 and the staff's gonna look at it and they could come back to us and say, look, we couldn't find one for, nobody wants this. Sorry, we tried. And then we end up with 4 or we end up with 5. And I think that's hedging our bets. And I don't think going out with that is too terribly going to be a terrible option. I think so.
I think that's fair. All right. Well, thank you all. That was a brilliant discussion. So let's move on to agenda review. Mr. City Manager, please.
Yes, sir. Thank you. We are moving in toward the end of February, which is almost hard to believe, really. And you'll notice in the pre-meeting for the 21st, we do have a guest from Rocky Mountain Power who'd like to come and visit with you, simply to give you a feel for what Rocky Mountain Power is up to, give you the chance to entertain any questions that you might have as it relates to their efforts and what's going on from their perspective and their industry and that kind of thing. However, we also have slated for the pre-meeting a council goals review. This is the draft report that your facilitator is bringing forward to give you sort of a look at, to make sure it reflects your will as it relates to the direction you want to give staff, who then will take that product, if you will, and flesh it out as it relates to some of the to-do list items that we think will help you meet those objectives. And so that's really what that's for. I guess my question is, do we think we're gonna need more time in pre-meeting then for those two discussions? Or are you comfortable that we can capture those two elements?
A lot of it's gonna depend on how long Rocky Mountain Power Update's gonna take.
Yeah.
Because that's unknown. The council goals preview shouldn't take more than 15 or 20 minutes for her to go over what we already all sat in and did. So a lot of it's gonna matter. Do you know how long he needs, or?
I would say we could probably relegate his time to 15 minutes with questions. And thereby leaving at least 15 minutes for the council goals review, which I think you're gonna need at a minimum.
Is that enough, or do we need to, go ahead, Lisa.
I just had a question when you guys are done.
Do we need to maybe kick the pre-meeting off about 15 minutes early just to make sure we have, so we're not rushing somebody through the door?
We can do that.
That'd be all right with everybody? So next week, we'll do pre-meeting at 5:15, which will do leadership at 4:45.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Ray, you go to that? Okay. All right, so next week, we will convene at 5:15 here in council chambers for our pre-meeting.
Very good. Of course, the big.
Mr. Bond, you hear that?
Yeah, yes, I did. Thank you.
Okay.
That's fine.
Can I?
Yes, yes, please.
So you have two entries for an MOU with Natrona County to transfer property. Are they regarding the same thing, or are we talking about two different things?
Mr. Mayor, do you mind if I defer to the clerk on that one?
Yeah, but yes, please. Where are you, Lisa?
So you've got it, one is under the settlement agreement with Westchester Fire Insurance Company, and then you've got another one towards the bottom, the third line up. So are we talking the same thing?
Your Honor, Counsel?
Please.
Yes, one was a placeholder, and then we got a title, so we changed it to the proper title, and it just didn't get removed.
Okay.
So it's just the same. The MOU with Natrona County to transfer property will come off.
Okay.
And the other one is the proper title that you'll see.
Thank you.
Thank you, Floor. Thank you, Lisa, for catching that. Any more on this agenda review, sir?
No, I think the two bigger items that you are all now very comfortable with and understand that are coming forward is the renewal of liquor licenses, and then of course interim topics.
And we will have executive session also.
Yes, sir.
Land and litigation next week.
Yes, indeed.
Okay.
Then, of course, we move to the last meeting of the month, the 28th. You can see there where we have some items for your consideration to discuss, a lot of which here are things that you are anticipating or having sort of asked, if you will, to be brought forward, with perhaps the electric fleet conversion study update. You'll recall that that is an MPO required study that we are obligated to fulfill. We will not see recommendations at that level, but rather an update as to where that study's at and what the progress is and so on.
You'll also take note when you're looking at the grid, March 28th, even though that's the fourth meeting of the month, I made an executive decision to cancel that meeting. That is spring break, and folks are planning to go with their children. And so we are going to forego that work session unless anyone has an objection to that. And that we will be coming into budgets right about then, right after that. So it's going to get pretty busy right after that. We'll probably have some extra meetings thrown in along the way in April and May. And so I thought that'd be a nice little last break before we head into budgets, and so that you can go and do with your kids on spring break, if you will. So anything else, sir?
I'd like to direct your attention to the back page as a part of this discussion to give you a view for what we have on our horizon in case there are things that might be missing or the timing of which you may not agree with either as it relates to what we've got loosely docketed on the back there. So, and that would conclude my report.
Thank you, sir. Anybody have any questions concerning the future agenda?
Yes.
Amber,
Just one
please.
Timeline clarifications. I know we've kind of punted the opening of the 1 cent applications pending our council goal setting And I see that it looks like we've got that on the work session for April 11th. Is that for the review of the applications, or when does the application period open?
I'd like to plug that one. Sure.
Your Honor, members or counselors, so it will open once we do our clarification next week over to make sure you are all good with the goals that you developed. We'll open that right away, and then it'll be open for roughly a month because that's what council asked for. So the timeline should still work for April 11th. That's when you'll see the applications. We'll give them all to you, and then at that time you can decide if you would like to have interviews with all of them. And so then we tentatively scheduled for the 25th for that meeting to be for all of them to come in. Okay. But if you, as you are all going through them between the 11th and the 18th, you could say, we don't want to do all of them, let's bring in a smaller group, or we could push the April 25th out, and we should still have time to be on track to do contracts and start it in July.
Okay, and so it should open shortly after our meeting next week.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Great. Thank you.
Steve?
I was the one that had asked about snow plowing, and it's scheduled for April 11th. Not going to be here.
Mr. Mayor, if it pleases the council, we could certainly reschedule that.
If you would, please,
Yeah.
because that's a topic he was after, so.
Absolutely.
We
We'd be
should
happy to
probably
do
be here
that.
to partake in the discussion.
That was why I brought it up.
They say snow plowing, everybody be like,
What?
Yeah. So yeah, if you don't mind finding a new spot for that.
No problem. No
That
problem.
would be great. Anything else, anybody? All right, let's move on,
And Carter,
if we may.
Carter,
Steve?
don't move it to the 25th either.
Well, you're really putting some, man. Okay, council around the table. Mr. Bond, council around the table. Do you have anything this evening?
No, I just want to say thank you to Salima and to the chief for the reports. I know those and those.
Okay, thanks, sir. Mr. Kathy?
I was double checking. Don't really have anything.
Okay, thank you, sir. Councilor Haskins?
I also don't have anything this week.
Very good. Councilor Pollock?
Report to you from the Economic Development Joint Powers Board meeting that we had this morning. We spent a fair bit of the time just reviewing projects. We've got a new appointee from the county. So we reviewed projects. We did get to hear from the folks at the Wild Sports Complex, presenting to that organization. We spent a fair bit of time talking about potential primarily federal grant opportunities that they may be trying to pursue, and how the Economic Development Joint Powers Board may be able to help leverage some of those on their behalf. So I would say that was probably the thing that was most relevant. I brought to them our plan for the master plan across the street, to let them know that we are committed to that area, and we've got some vision that we're trying to put in place for there. So I think that's, well, I have Anna Reese agreement tomorrow, so I'll have a report from you on that next week, and also LGBTQ advisory Friday.
Busy.
Yeah, Carter canceled the Metro meeting, so I'm on the hook for one.
Anything else?
That's it.
All right, well, thank you. Lisa?
I attended Parks and Rec Board. Baseball is getting ready to get geared up. Lots of little kids getting ready to go out and play baseball. It's going to be a good time. And I have no meetings this week.
And the Spuds. The Spuds are coming, right?
Spuds are coming. Yes, they are.
Excellent. Anything else?
That's it.
Okay, thank you. Jenna?
Nope, I'm good. No meetings.
Nothing tonight?
Nope.
Okay. Mr. Kyle?
Thanks, Bruce.
Sure.
Casper Fire EMS had an awards ceremony last Saturday. Chief Black recognized staff for meritorious conduct, I believe is how you say that, distinguished service citations, crew of the year, firefighter of the year, that was Eric Christensen, and then the Brotherhood Award, Jennifer Hudson. So lots of people received awards. I'm sorry, what was it?
I think it's Henderson.
Is it Jennifer Henderson? I apologize.
Shouldn't it be a sisterhood award? Shouldn't it be a sisterhood award, not a brotherhood award? Just checking. Just checking.
There's a couple local news articles that were published about it. So if you're curious, it was good to hear about all the good deeds that have been done over the past year, and just seeing folks from those departments recognize their peers for outstanding work. In addition to that, I believe this Friday is the police department's award ceremony. So next week. Okay, cool. Yeah, the 24th. I see that. So yeah, looking forward to seeing who gets recognized then. Other than that, I don't have anything other than I did just want to revisit the conversation we had earlier about cannabis. I'll let it die since we've sort of taken our majority vote on it. But I would still maintain that the way that we have handled the issue in this state for decades and decades is not yielding the results that we'd like to see. It's yielding the opposite, I would argue. In the states that legalize marijuana, you see there are negative impacts. I would say they are, Colorado is always the example, and I think that's a bit of a misnomer because they were the very first place that did it. And so I don't think you can take data from Colorado and generalize it across the country. You should look at any of the other 22, I think, states that have legalized. You're going to see those impacts much smaller because, again, it wasn't that vacuum effect of it being the first place in the country. In states that legalize, you see a reduction in opioid overdose fatalities. I know in our state we struggle with that, and we're seeing an increase in fentanyl. Turns out when people have another legal alternative, a lot of the times they choose that instead. To that point, in Casper, it was probably 10 years ago at this point, we had a little stint where teenagers were experimenting with K2 and spice. We had several of our youth end up in the hospital. I was working at WBI at the time. I saw multiple people's lives ruined by smoking K2 and spice, these marketed legal alternatives to weed. They're not natural. They're not out of the ground. They're formulated in a laboratory, and there's no regulation or nothing. And so 20 Cody High School students came and spoke to the legislative session this year because 8 of their peers ended up in the hospital within a week time span from smoking Delta 8. And so I think when you keep a substance illegal like that, you are incentivizing people to try other legal alternatives. Salvia is another one. I believe it's still legal. You can probably still find it in smoke shops in town. I tried salvia when I was a teen. It jacks you up, man. It is way, way worse than cannabis. Would not recommend it to anyone, but I believe it's still legal. You can go pick it up at any local smoke shop. And so you incentivize people to experiment with other drugs that we have much less research on, that haven't been used for hundreds of years, and we have kind of this understanding of how they affect the body. You're incentivizing people to use legal drugs that have unknown factors. Going back to the surveys of Wyoming residents, 75% of our state's residents do not believe possession of cannabis should result in jail time. Over half of them support full-blown legalization. Tonight we were just talking about decriminalization. If we are representing the constituents of our state, of our community, I would argue that Casper would absolutely match those stats. And so in my opinion, the majority of our constituents want this, and it's our duty to support them in that. And so I guess I'm just disappointed with the unwillingness to address the taboo that I think is in this state. I think the status quo is in place based on nothing other than social norms and taboos. And just because we've done things a certain way is not a good reason to continue doing it into the future. I would very much advocate that this council and other councils across the state, and certainly our state legislature, take a harm reductive approach to issues like substance abuse or other quote unquote unhealthy behaviors. It's the same exact thing as giving kids condoms in high school. You're not enabling that behavior. You are accepting the fact that people are going to do things you tell them not to do, and you have to create the environment so that they can carry out those activities in the healthiest way possible while minimizing any potential harms. And so we have to get to a point where we accept the fact that people are going to smoke cannabis in the state. People are going to do it. It's been illegal forever, and they still do it. And all of our metrics are getting worse and worse. And so we have to accept that fact and create an environment where they are using substances of all kinds in the healthiest manner possible that also reduces the amount of taxpayer dollars that we are spending to address the problem. So I guess I'm going to keep advocating that our council orient ourselves in that position. I think as a state, I think this council could lead in the state as far as confronting these social taboos, these social norms that are not working in our best favor. They are working against us. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Mayor?
I wasn't able to make the EDJVP meeting because of work, but thank you, Amber, for being there and being able to update us. Council of Governments on Thursday morning, bright and early, 7 a.m. for Aimington. So we'll be meeting with mayors and county commissioners, and then LGBTQ meeting on Friday. I will be there for that.
Thank you, sir. Steve?
I forgot one thing I wanted to advocate for because it is a fundraiser. API Chili Cook-Off is this Saturday.
I forgot that too.
Yep. And by the way, go Chiefs.
And you lost me.
Okay. The Council of Mayors elected, or appointed, excuse me, our Vice Mayor Pacheco to the Fremont County Regional Recreation
We'll be
Board.
going to Fremont County.
This
is our last meeting.
Did I say Fremont County? Yes, you did. Sorry, my daughter just texted me and said she finally made it home and the roads were horrific, so I'm sorry. Natrona County Recreation Board, Ray Pacheco will be joining 3 folks from the school district and 1 other person on that board. So it's good to have somebody from Casper on the board. That's a 2-year appointment. And that he's been entrusted that by all the other mayors, so that worked out really well. We do have a breakfast Thursday morning, 7 a.m., and I have got to share with you. So since I've been mayor, this is probably the busiest I've ever been. I'm literally doing something every single day, whether it's, I mean, it just doesn't matter. But this last Saturday night was probably the most rewarding, most fantastic thing I think I've ever done in my entire life. I kid you not. This was the night, Tim Tebow Night to Shine at the Highland Park Church. And I went and I delivered a speech, and I had this speech written out. And by the time it came to give it, I put it in my pocket and I just let it fly, because I've never seen, if you ever get an opportunity to go, I'm telling you, I cried, I laughed. These special needs kids are treated like royalty. They open the door one at a time and they walk them down this red carpet. And this crowd of hundreds of people literally just roar. It's like you're in a football stadium every single time one of those little people walk down. And the smile on their face and the way it made them feel so special was, I've never seen anything like it. And there were high school kids that were just giving of themselves to make sure that it was special for those particular people. I'm telling you, it was the most rewarding thing I've ever done. It was amazing. So next year, if you get an opportunity, you've got to go see that. You've got to see the smile on the faces that it puts on those kids. It's just unbelievable. And it's the world to them. It is the most spectacular thing. It'd be like you winning the Super Bowl. I mean, that's how they felt. You could just see it on their face. Anyway, so even though the mayor is busy, it's really rewarding at times. So that's all I have. Thank you. We'll see you next Tuesday early at 5:15 for the pre-meeting.
Thanks for spending your Valentine's with us.
Yeah, happy Valentine's Day.
My wife thanks you too.
Oh, tell Susie. Thank you.
Tell Susie. Thank you.
It's a special message.
Blue ink? Blue ink, okay?
Do you?
Lord.
Should I take them back now?
I'm gonna be going 3 years.
Yeah, you are.
It is a family.
There's no way you're not
It really
using
is.
email.